You sit at a desk. They sit at a desk. You have sales reports. They have book reports. You need supplies. They need supplies. Business is a lot like school. That's why your small business should take advantage of back-to-school deals at Staples. Now, Staples 1-inch 3-ring binders are $1.92. 1 subject notebooks are just 25 cents, and 2 pocket poly folders are just 35 cents each. Make back-to-school your business at Staples.
In-store only while supplies last. Offer ends 9/1/18, limit 30.
Know your name, I swear I do. It's on the tip of my tongue. Sorry, what did you say? Yeah, I've known you for how long? Your face is so familiar, but no name comes to mind. Please, can you remind me if you'll be so kind? Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case. Trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last?
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host and founder, Lori La Bey, and I welcome you today. Hopefully, weather is great in your area. It looks like we're going to be having a few storms here in Minnesota, but shouldn't be too bad. Anyways, I wanted to, again, just welcome everyone to the show and let you know how much we appreciate all of you and your work in terms of helping get our show out there. You see, your likes, your clicks, and your shares have really expanded the knowledge base and allowed others who are dealing with dementia learn a little bit more about it through others like yourself, people who are caring for a loved one or maybe being diagnosed. Maybe they're a researcher, a singer, a songwriter, a business person, or an advocate. Here on Alzheimer Speaks Radio, we are basically an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. And we also help companies expand their brand footprint by leveraging our platforms and our content to increase access to those people who are really searching out and looking for their services, products, and tools. I would encourage you to connect with me if you have something about dementia that you'd like to talk about and share. You can contact me through the radio program here, or you can go to alzheimerspeaks.com. There's a big contact button there, and connect with me that way, or on Facebook as well. So again, thank you so much for all you're doing. Your likes, your clicks, your shares are really quite powerful. Now, before we get started today with our show, I always like to do a couple of shout outs. And so the first one I'm going to shout out to is the World Kindness USA organization. They just started here, and I'm so excited about them. They already had a soft launch in LA. They're going to be doing another one in, I believe it's Maryland, in September. They're having a lot of interest. This is something that is in many other countries, and it's exciting to see, and I think it's something that we need so bad here. And you can go to worldkindnessusa.org to get more information. That's worldkindnessusa.org to get more information about them. Another company that is dementia-related is called the Roberto app, and if you're not familiar with it, I would suggest that you check that out. It is a video game, basically, that allows you to figure out and see how your brain is functioning, and it's something that will collect data for you and really kind of show you kind of good days, bad days, and help you figure out maybe what you need to change in your lifestyle. Maybe it's more sleep, more exercise, less alcohol, eating better, all different types of things. You'll get some insights, or maybe it's something more serious that you want to share with your doctor. So go to the Roberto app. You can just go to alzheimerspeaks.com, go to our front page, and you can get an extended free trial there to check out. Another organization that's doing something really cool, they're in beta testing, is called Care to Plan, which is going to be a national resource directory specifically for dementia. You can learn more about that, again, by going to Alzheimer Speaks and then go to our resource tab and you'll be able to see what it looks like, and you'll also be able to check it out and get involved with it if you'd like, if you're a business, or maybe you are just a family member who is looking for information for somebody to be able to do searches and so forth. So there's a lot of neat things that are right around the corner. So let me get into our guest today. We are going to be talking with a new author who wrote the book Nana Forgot My Name, and her name is Sara Bell, and she left the corporate world in early 2016 to care for her grandmother who had Alzheimer's. She started working for herself in experiential marketing and customer service for small businesses and event coordinators, and she now blogs about her experiences as a caregiver, and recently, like I said, completed this book, which is just rolling out in September, and her whole goal here is to help kids make sense of dementia. So welcome, Sara. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm great. Thanks for having me, Lori.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show today. I mentioned that your grandmother had dementia. Can you give our audience a little more background in terms of, was it your grandmother who noticed these changes, or was it family themselves who saw these changes starting to occur within your Nana?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely family first. And when we started to notice the changes, we didn't necessarily put two and two together for several years. Hindsight's always 20/20, and I think after her diagnosis was when we really started to connect the dots and realize that some of her signs appeared much earlier than her diagnosis. But she's had Alzheimer's for a little over 10 years now. And we actually, we encouraged my grandfather at the time, who was her caregiver, to take her to the doctor and to have these tests done, just the simple Alzheimer's test, like hold up a pen and what is this for, and in order to see her level of response. And it was what we thought, which was Alzheimer's.
Okay. And that's pretty typical. A lot of times family and friends will notice things before a person does. Other times, the person will notice it but doesn't really want to say anything because they don't want to lose their independence and things too. So I'm glad that you got her in. How did the family receive the information, and how did she adjust to it once you got that diagnosis?
I think when she first got it, she was probably a bit in denial. I recall I was young at the time, and I recall her saying, I'm not crazy like my mom, because she associated the disease with someone who's lost their mind. And so I think she took it really hard. She had a hard time and ended up actually not wanting to talk about it much and not wanting to acknowledge it. She certainly didn't want to take any medications. They did try some medications early on that she complained of nausea and other side effects, and so she didn't want to take anything. And as far as the rest of my family, I think we were pretty supportive, but we really didn't have any idea of what was to come or what we'd experience. And then over the years, while my grandfather cared for her, he was really good about hiding, I think, the challenges that he experienced. He didn't ask for help from us. When we went to visit, he never said anything that was alarming or that made us feel like he needed any more support. And then, of course, when he passed away, it was a bit sudden. He was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in early 2016, and only lived for a couple months past his diagnosis. And when I took over care of my Nana, I think that's when we realized the extent of her Alzheimer's and probably what my grandfather had been dealing with for years on his own, and really what he could have used some significant help with.
Yeah, my dad did the same thing, with my mom, and my mom kind of reacted the same way as your grandma, even though she knew in her heart, and she would talk that she thought she had it. She was so afraid that people were going to look at her as crazy, because she always said that her mom went crazy at the end. And I was really young when my grandma died, and I thought it was from the morphine from the cancer. And who knows, because back then they didn't really talk about Alzheimer's at all. People were senile and things like that. And so the verbiage, I think, was so derogatory. The other thing I find interesting is that era, men and women just really stepped up. They kept things private. They, you didn't air your dirty laundry, and yet there's so many people that want to help and support. And so I hope over time we see that change more and people feel more comfortable sharing what the true experience is like. So, and that brings us right to you, because you stepped in as her full-time care partner, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so what were some of the things that you noticed when you were caring for your grandma?
I noticed right away that the only thing she knew for sure was her own name. So she knew her name was Barbara. And other than that, every moment was different. And I really, I couldn't tell you if it was going to be a good moment or if it was going to be a challenging moment. But I realized that through caring for her, that being present and focused on what we're doing in the moment was vital to us having at least a stressful day as possible. In my first couple nights of staying with her, I had my bedroom set up with a twin-size bed next to mine that she laid in. And she would get up throughout the night, probably 20 times during the night, and would hardly sleep at all because she was looking for who she called her daddy, which I associate with my grandfather. I think she called him daddy because he was her kid's daddy. But she would get up in the middle of the night looking for daddy, and in the first couple days I realized, maybe she thinks that he should be in bed with her, and so we changed her sleeping arrangement so every night I went to bed in the same bed as her, and she would sleep much more. She'd still wake up, she'd roll over and say, "Daddy, are you there?" And I'd just kind of respond, "Yeah," and hope that she would go back to sleep. And then if she would catch on, like if she was too awake and she noticed that I was not my grandfather, she would say, "Well, we got to get up. You're not Daddy. We got to get up and go find Daddy." So we spent a lot of time looking for people and for her babies and for things that maybe aren't in existence anymore, but in her mind I knew that she thought it was the truth and she thought it was reality, and so it was important for me to kind of just go with the flow of whatever she was telling me and hope that we would come out on the other end, like even if we were searching, that I would somehow be able to redirect her and get her focus off of whatever we were searching for and onto some other activity that we were doing, like getting ice cream or going shopping or even just walking around at the local parks or zoos.
Oh, that's neat. It's nice that you were able to accommodate. I mean, just that small thing of sleeping together and having that body, next to her, brought her comfort. And I think so often we forget about the little things that we can do to make them more calm and comfortable and content. And not that it works every time, but it works a lot better than trying to do corrective measures and re-engage them or reorient them to, the space and time today. Because there's that old saying, if you're going to argue, don't argue with the person with dementia because you're never going to win. Because
you're not going to win, no.
Yeah.
I tried that too. There were several times where I myself as a caregiver found frustration and I would try my best not to take it out on my grandmother. Obviously, I didn't want to get upset with her, but there were times where I'd just tell her the truth and the blunt truth, and I quickly realized that was not the route to take, because she not only did she think that I was lying, but then she also thought that I was being rude and mean, and that I couldn't be, like, she called me her person, and so she associated, there was some familiarity with me. She didn't know who I was, but when we were with other people, she would tell them that I was her person. And when I told her the truth, like that my grandfather had passed away, or that she has Alzheimer's and that she needed to listen to me, she had a really hard time with that. And would just fight it. And then she, there was a time where we took a cross-country road trip, and we went to Oklahoma City to visit my sisters, and on our way we ended up in Washington, D.C., living with my uncles. But when we stopped, and I don't know what I told her, but I told her some portion of the truth, and she ended up going outside, and she was like, "Stop trying to murder me." And so she went down a whole different negative path. And that was probably 4 months into caregiving when I was like, okay, no more really telling the truth to Nana. This is going to be, if I want to have a good time as a caregiver and as least a stressful time as possible, then I need to just let her think whatever it is that's going on in her mind, and just try to redirect and refocus, and try to use, humor and love and really compassionate caregiving to our benefit.
Well, and I love all those words: redirect, refocus, be loving and compassionate, and utilizing that humor. For myself, with my mom, there were times like you where I wasn't the most gracious daughter, and you would try, but sometimes you would just snap, and you don't kind of like looking in the mirror and seeing yourself that way. And I too had to kind of redesign, how am I going to deal with this? Because with my mom, she would repeat herself maybe 40 times in 10 minutes, and I couldn't always make a game out of it. I couldn't pretend that I just heard it the first time like it was the first time for her. And sometimes I would snap, or I would kind of do that corrective care. And, I came to the point of, all right, what do I really need her to know? And it was that I love her, and, I want her to be safe, happy, and pain-free. And so when I focused on those three things versus is the story correct, or is it relevant, it just made everything so much easier. And I learned a lot about her, and I hear that others say the same thing, that they get to explore their person that they're caring for in a new light. And it really is, I don't know, I think it makes you feel really good to know that they're comfortable and that they feel loved and that they feel safe. And it sounds like that's exactly what you found as well. So your Nana is your inspiration basically for this children's book that you wrote. What age of child would you say that this is for?
I'd say, it's written in rhyming, so there are some big words in it, like Alzheimer's, but I'd say it's probably for a 6 to 7 year old age group, about the ages of my nieces and nephews, who really had a hard time understanding why Nana would come up and just reintroduce herself every single time that she saw them. So that's the age group that I intended it for. I think it will do well across most elementary age.
Yeah, I love the pictures. It's illustrated beautifully and nice and colorful and things. Now, there came a point where you felt that you just couldn't care for her at home anymore. How did you process that and then bring that up to the rest of the family?
That was a hard realization, because I'm a pretty stubborn person in general, and when I am determined to do something, I'll find a way to do it. And I felt that way with caring for my Nana. When I first took on the role of caregiver, I got some pushback because I was working in a corporate role at the time, and I was in my late 20s, and that a lot of people consider that kind of the prime of your life, and they were like, you can't give up your life for your Nana, and we can find someone else to take care of her, and we can figure it out along the way. And I said, you know what? Nope, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it for as long as I can. My grandfather didn't want her in a nursing home. That's why he cared for her as long as he did, because he wasn't going to place her anywhere else. He wouldn't even put her in an adult daycare center even during the day when we encouraged him to get some or to seek some sort of respite care. He didn't want to do that. And so for me, about a year into caregiving, we had plateaued. We'd gone through some periods of time where it seemed like she was improving, not necessarily improving cognitively, but improving with her sense of routine and familiarity with me, and that I could accomplish certain tasks during the day. I had found an adult day center that would accept someone with Alzheimer's, which is sometimes hard to do. And she had been going for maybe 3 to 4 hours a day. And then about a year into it, we had a really rough day. And I don't remember the specifics of the day, only the feeling in the pit of my stomach that, okay, this isn't as rough as it gets. And if this isn't as rough as it gets, then when will it get worse? And will I honestly be able to care for her and for myself? And my answer was no. Like, when it gets worse, I don't know when it's going to get worse. But I do know that when it gets worse than this, I won't be able to handle it on my own or with the support of my family. I was very supported by my uncles and by my parents and my other family members. But it was just that I don't know how to explain it other than the gut feeling of what happens when I am not able to care for her. And so I was very honest with my uncles about it. And at the time we lived with them, and so it was easy for them to understand because they saw a lot of it and they experienced it right there alongside with me. And so we began the hunt for a perfect home for my Nana. And because my papa didn't want her in a nursing home, I had a lot of unease about placing her somewhere. And so I went on a bunch of tours. I went to several assisted living facilities and places that had memory care. And I quickly realized that in many places, memory care is an afterthought. It's not necessarily what they focus on. It's what they have developed when they've had a group of residents that they later found needed memory care. And so the homes were nothing like what I imagined for my Nana. And I made a very specific list of things that I wanted in her ideal home. I wanted it to be open. I wanted her caregivers to be friendly. I wanted it to be very engaging. My Nana likes to be on the move and on the go. I didn't want her to feel trapped in a room or in a house. And fortunately, I found it in a facility in her hometown in San Diego, California, and it was everything I could have wanted and more. And so I did a phone interview with them, and I knew just from looking at their website that they would have the level of care that we wanted for her. And then when I got back and we did the tour with her, I just fell in love with it, and I said, this is definitely the place for my Nana. Their caregivers work in shifts. Instead of 24/7 like myself, they have 8-hour shifts, and so they come back and they're refreshed, and they're not so personally attached to the person with Alzheimer's or dementia, and so they can provide a really level-headed caregiving approach, I guess. And they keep her so engaged. They take her on field trips. They feed her breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they have just such a great facility and a great atmosphere. And really, it was more than I could have ever asked for and hoped for in a place for my Nana.
That's nice. Was it a large community or was it a small group home?
It's called Sunshine Care, and they actually have a group of homes. It's like it's set up in a cul-de-sac, and they have some single-family homes that they've converted, and they have a larger facility, which is what my Nana's in, a facility type where there's 24 or 25 beds in the facility, and she has a roommate that has a similar level of dementia as her, and they include everyone from like what they do it in levels of dementia. So if you have like an early stage dementia, or if you need less assistance. You would live in one of the smaller single-family homes with, maybe you bring your dog or your other pets, and they will assist you with those sorts of things, and then all the way up until end of life. So based on the level that you're at determines like where you're living in their community.
Oh, that sounds really neat. I like that, having kind of that end of the cul-de-sac and kind of smaller housing options, but yet being connected. That is
Right.
wonderful. And I love the fact that you took the time to tour. So often many people will just wait until a crisis hits, and then you don't have any choice. And you really, sounds like you really put a lot of thought into what will work and what isn't going to work, and you really looked at what does your Nana need? What's going to make her happy and be a good match. Now, in terms of deciding that, was it easy to get the rest of the family on board after you kind of did all your homework and things?
Yeah, I think so. Everyone was a little uneasy with it at first because anytime you're going to place your loved one, it almost feels like you're jailing them. But we were very clear with the facility that we chose that we wanted her to be able to go out. Like her kids can go, and there's select people on like her list that can go and pick her up and take her to lunch if they want to, and then bring her back, which is, I think, unusual for memory care. A lot of places they said, you need to, once they're here, and you can come and visit, but you have limited visiting hours. And with this place, we can pretty much go around the clock whenever we want to. There's always caregivers on site. There's always people that are awake. And if I wanted to go visit her in the middle of the night, I could go visit her in the middle of the night. And that was important to us. We have, free access to my Nana, if you will. She's not stuck there. She doesn't have to stay there. We've tried to take her out several times, and we've realized that it might be easier for us to just go and visit and not necessarily take her on an adventure, because when we bring her back, she doesn't always want to stay. But when she's in her routine, it really works well. So it was easy for them to get on board. I think once they realized that, and they knew that it was no easy feat to take care of her. So our family's really big. My Nana and Papa adopted 16 kids after they gave birth to 4. So there's 20 people that call her mom. And so it was a lot of coordination, but at the same time, not, because they're all super supportive too, and they just want what's best for her at the end of the day.
Well, that's 20 kids. That's a lot of kids and a lot of coordination, because you hear the struggles sometimes that families have getting everybody on the same page. But it sure sounds like she was very well loved, and I can see where the struggle would come to when you promised your grandpa you wouldn't do that. And I think most families go through that. We make a commitment when things are different, and then when they change, we still hold ourselves to that, not saying, well, we didn't say that when circumstances had changed and things. So I give you kudos for realizing that and really finding the best care for her, for the symptoms that she's experiencing. And I love how you guys worked with the community instead of just accepting the rules. You said, hey, this is what we need. And I think a lot of times people don't ask for what it is they want. They just think the rules are hard and fast and they're not going to change. But many places will work with you if you let them know what it is you need and why. And so kudos to you. How did you adjust? Because that's a big thing, going from caring for somebody 24/7 to all of a sudden their place. How did you adjust in that?
I had a bit of a hard time, but at the same time, while I was caring for her, I was working for myself, and so I was up in the early morning hours before she'd awake, and then I'd work again late at night, just to try to make ends meet for my own bills. And so I had stayed busy. When I stopped caring for her, I kept working for my clients, and I actually had a client that offered me a full-time position in Minneapolis. So I relocated. It worked out. The timing worked out great that I relocated, and I thought I wanted a corporate a corporate role again, and I was in that role for about a year, and then in May of this year, I actually was laid off, and so I have refocused my efforts into working for myself again, and realized that at the end of the day, that's what I wanted, but in order to kind of give myself a mental and emotional break, I took that corporate position to take my mind off of the fact that I wasn't caring for my Nana anymore, and that so much was going to change. It was easier for me to relocate and focus on work than it was to really look at the changes that were happening. So that's kind of how I use, not avoidance, but a bit of avoidance or distraction to help myself get through it.
Yep. We'll call it redirection there for a little while. Yeah. And
yes.
you know, I mean, it works for all of us in life, and sometimes you just have to jump back in and get going, because if you just sit and dwell on it, you end up spinning sometimes, and life does move on and forward, and you know, you get into that corporate world or old routines again. I think your body and your mind starts to feel a little bit more normal again in terms of what life looks like for 99% of the population out there.
Right.
And because I know for me, when I was doing it, people didn't really understand what it took to care for somebody. You know, it's just, can't you just do a normal job? And it's like, no, it's not like that. You don't get a break. You know, you're
right.
always,
I would
always.
I would laugh. They would tell me, "You have such a big heart," and I'm thinking, you don't understand the necessity of the caregiving role, of the family caregiving role. And of course, I have a big heart. Like, I love my Nana very much, but there was a need, and I was filling that need for my family, and I didn't want to be a 24/7 caregiver for life. That's just, I don't know that. You know, it made me reconsider whether or not I wanted children, because taking care of my Nana was so challenging for me. And I thought, okay, she's, you know, at the level of Alzheimer's that she's at, she's kind of like a 4 or 5 year old kid in a lot of her physical needs. She needs me to help her brush her teeth or get changed or go to the bathroom, or she has accidents, or she can't take care of herself in that way. And so I would kind of giggle when people didn't understand it. They'd say, "You have such a big heart. You must be so sweet and so like so loving." I'd be like, "Well, we have to. Like, someone has to do it, and I want to do my best," which is great. And of course, I love my Nana and try to take care of her as best as possible. But it's not always that, you know, the caregiver just has a huge heart. Sometimes it's a need, and then they need help too. And it's hard to find and hard to ask for.
Exactly. How did she adjust to her new home?
It took a little while. So the facility had some recommendations, and where we would take her down for the first couple days. We just took her down on a tour, and we would leave her for a couple hours, because she had gone to an adult day center. And when I was acquainting her with the adult day center, she also could only stay for like an hour or two at first, and then each day we'd kind of increase it to get her familiar with the space and to make sure that she could stay for ended up 3 to 4 hours. And so we did kind of the same thing when we introduced her to Sunshine Care, and I think it worked pretty well. For the first few times, like, she would, if I came down, if I left, she'd be like, "Where are you going? When are you coming back?" And then as soon as she'd see me walk through the door, she was ready to go. Like, she was like, "Okay, we're leaving. Thank you. I've been waiting for you." And so the caregivers and they would kind of giggle, because they were like, she just recognizes you and she doesn't want to stay. But I think that with time, it just got easier for her to stay longer periods of time. The first night was pretty tough, and they were very open with me. That's another thing that I love about her home, is that they call me or they text me, and they would tell me when she was having a rough night, or they would tell me, she's been up all night and she's been looking for her baby. And I would tell them, well, there's a little stuffed animal in her drawer. Go get that out. And it purrs, and give that to her. And she, sometimes she calls that her baby. So that could be what she's looking for, or it'll at least take her attention away from it. And I think it helped her adjust to it as best as possible. To where now I think she feels like she's at home. I visited her a few times since I've moved to Minneapolis. I've gone back to San Diego, and each time that I've gone back, she seems more and more at home and where she's supposed to be. She kind of makes friends with everyone. They dance a lot, and we always tease that my Nana finds a new boyfriend all the time there. She always is dancing with a new man, and she kind of totes him around and holds his hand, and then she'll tell us that that's her man. So I think she's really adjusted to it very well.
Oh, that's good. That's good. My mom was a real social butterfly too, like that, and it was just really nice to see. Now, is there a lot of family out of the 20 that live in the California area for her to be able to visit?
Probably about half are still there, and the rest will come and visit. But that's why it was important for us to keep her, because with me, I was very mobile, and I've lived around the U.S. I was a flight attendant, and I've traveled since I was 18 years old, just state to state, and so it was easy for me to say, okay, come on, Nana, let's get in the car and let's move to Washington, D.C. But we knew that ultimately we wanted her to be back at home in San Diego. It would be easier for our family. It's where my grandfather is buried, and it's also where all of her friends and loved ones really are.
It's so nice that this Sunshine Care is so communicative with you and the family, and really seems to know what her needs are and so forth. So, what brought you to the space of wanting to write the book?
I really wanted to help other millennial caregivers. Was my first priority. I wanted to help other millennial caregivers who are kind of sandwiched in the middle, and they are caring for their parents or their grandparents, and they also have children of their own that they're raising. And so I couldn't imagine, I'm 30 now, and I can't imagine having kids of my own and also trying to care for my Nana. And I've met so many of my peers that are around my same age or up into their mid-40s that have kids still that they're raising, and then they're caring for their parent or their grandparent, and they have a really hard time explaining to their kids what Alzheimer's is and why their loved one is doing things that they're doing. And so since I used humor so much with caring for my Nana, I just wanted to use it to help others. And so I wrote a poem originally for my nieces and nephews, and I kind of shared it with my family, and they laughed, and I was encouraged to turn it into a children's book. So I expanded on it a little bit and then got it illustrated so that I could share it with others who might be dealing with the same sorts of things. Every person with Alzheimer's has very different signs and symptoms and things that they get caught up on, but I think the underlying feelings are still the same, and so I tried to use those kind of humorous symbolism throughout my poem to explain those feelings.
Are you self-publishing?
I am self-publishing.
Okay, and how did you find that process? I think everybody thinks it's easy to write a book, and
yeah, it was challenging. It's cost several $1,000s so far, and the book's going to be printed in September, so that'll be another couple of $1,000s, I'm sure, by the time it's all done. It's a lot more expensive than people realize, especially if you work with a professional illustrator like I did. When you commission an artist to do that kind of work, it's not always cheap, and it is hard because you're creating your own deadlines, and then you also are responsible for your own marketing. So I have a pretty strong network, but I think when I did my pre-sale, I had a ton of interest, and I probably sold 2 copies in the first day.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, when you're in it for the long haul, to me, the 2 copies, it doesn't matter as long as those people enjoy the book. I'm not seeking to be a millionaire from Nana Forgot My Name, but it is definitely not an easy process. And it's really an investment. And to me, it was just my way to work through what I was experiencing and then turn it into something useful for the next person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. Like I said, I think a lot of people think writing a book is an easy process, and it's not. I know I've started on a couple, and I've just kind of stalled out because it's time consuming and it's expensive both. And it's like you said, the deadlines. There's just so much more to it than you would ever imagine. And one of these days, I'll get it done when it's the right time for me. But
I always recommend to people, I contributed to a chapter book. It was a collaborative chapter book, and it was sponsored by a publisher, but I paid, I want to say $500 or $600 to participate to get my chapter into the book. And that was the smoothest experience that I've had with publishing, because it wasn't quite self-publishing, but all I had to do was focus on the writing. And then with my minimal investment, I had access to copies of my book for a wholesale rate, and I could turn around and sell it for what I wanted to sell it. So it was much less investment and a little bit more guided with, publisher deadlines that I had to meet and requirements for my chapter. There were pretty strict guidelines for how many words we could write, et cetera. And that is what I recommend to people who are just looking into getting started as a published author. And then when they're ready to, once they've experienced that, they can kind of use the network that they've created, because then all of a sudden you're introduced to 20 or so other authors, and several of them have published elsewhere. And you're also introduced to a publisher who has access to all kinds of resources for someone who's seeking to self-publish someday.
Yeah, I agree. Doing a chapter that's a breeze, because it's just like writing an article. Like you said, they have all the guidelines. You don't have to think about formatting and timelines other than just yourself. But when you've got all those other things in place, it can be daunting, especially when you're not familiar with it or you're not sure what the rules even should be. If you're self-publishing and I've seen some books come out where it's a beautiful book, but they didn't put their margins in correctly, and stuff. So it's a lot more than what people would think. But I think it's great that you decided to share your experience with others and kind of your words of wisdom. What pieces of advice would you share with other care partners out there?
The main piece of advice that I tell any caregiver that I meet is, when you need help, find it, get it. There is help out there. There are resources available. Sometimes you have to be resourceful, but sometimes it's as simple as calling your county that you live in and asking for a caseworker. That's what I did when I first got started. I said, you know what, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I need help with. And I called the county and I said, I'm taking care of my Nana, and she's in a safe environment and she's in a healthy environment, but I need a caseworker because I need someone who can help me navigate the system. And it's really, really so vital to a caregiver's success and their own self-care too, to have that help and respite care when they need it. Caring for someone 24/7 is exhausting, and it's easy for people to say, why don't you take a break? But even having a loved one watch her for a couple of hours was hard for us, and it wasn't until I truly sought the help that I needed, like getting her enrolled in an adult day center that would accept someone with Alzheimer's, and then all the way down to eventually finding a long-term care facility that could be her new home. Those sorts of things, it's hard to navigate the system when you're caregiving, and so it's important to seek help when you need it.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times too, and I think, that could be why your grandfather or my dad didn't reach out, because then it's this whole educational process of what the needs are and why you do what you do. And that's exhausting, too, when you're already tired to try to retrain somebody else in. But there is a lot of help out there. But I think so often we don't even know what to ask for. We just know we need help. And so going to a professional, somebody who's in the industry where that's their specialty, that's why they're there, to give us that hand and to be able to guide us. I think those are really wise words. And I know it's hard sometimes to reach out, or we think that we don't have the time, but in the long haul, it'll save you time. And it'll save you a lot of energy, too. And did you ever do any, support groups at all for yourself or for your Nana?
I did. Actually, I didn't do support groups when I was a caregiver because I was so busy being 24/7 caregiver that I didn't find the time for it. And I actually didn't join a support group until I transitioned out of being full-time caregiver, and that's when I realized, okay, this is a big change, and maybe I do want to go and talk about it with other people who've been through it. And I found the Young Champs group here in Minneapolis. It's associated with the Alzheimer's Association, and they're an advocacy leg of that is specifically focused on millennial caregivers, and they have chapters all across the U.S. But I found that their group is so supportive of one another, and there are some people who are still full-time caregivers that are involved in it, and then others whose parents or grandparents have passed from Alzheimer's or dementia, and then others who are kind of like me, which is caregivers from a distance, like their loved one is now placed in a home, and so they don't have to be a 24/7 caregiver, but they're still involved in the process, and that has been incredibly helpful to me too, just to help really go through my own emotions around caregiving and transitioning out of full-time caregiver.
Well, that's great. And, when you're transitioning out too, you can help somebody who's still in, because you've been there and you've done that. And I think that's one of the things that we forget about sometimes is in life we're always going to be 10 steps ahead of somebody else and 10 steps behind somebody else. And so being able to have that honest discussion and knowing that we're all here to serve a purpose and can really collaborate and help one another out in different fashions. And there's no right or wrong. It's just about making the world a better place, which I think your book will do for many people. So I thank you for spending the time with us. Any other words of wisdom that you'd like to pass on, maybe to someone who is thinking that they might be having some symptoms of a form of dementia?
If you're thinking that you're having some symptoms of a form of dementia, I'd say it's very important to share that with your loved ones or your support system. Your friends and family can help you more than you may think.
Great. And then for people to contact you, you have a blog, mynanaskeeper.com. Again, that's mynanaskeeper.com. You're also on social media, it looks like on Twitter, as Sara Ann Bell, and then My Nana, Nanas, and then Keeper, you have KPR.
On Instagram and Facebook.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for spending time with us. I look forward to your formal launch of your book, Nana Forgot My Name. Again, we've been speaking with author Sara Bell. And wrapping up here, I'm just going to give a shout out to a couple other organizations. One is the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation that is located in Arizona, but people connect with them all around the world. They are a company that focuses on holistic approaches. So if you're looking at diet and exercise and meditation, they're really a place that you are going to want to go check out. I also highly recommend if you are diagnosed with dementia or if you're caring for a loved one or a client with dementia, that you check into participating possibly in a memory cafe in your area. We now have over 500 of them in the U.S., and you can go to memorycafedirectory.com. That's memorycafedirectory.com. And two last that I'm going to shout out to is the Purple Table Reservations. If you go to purpletables.com, you can find information to see if there is a restaurant in your area that has been educated and who has a special program in dealing with serving those who have dementia, or maybe it's autism or post-traumatic stress. But they have an app that's pretty cool. They're in the process of trying to onboard more restaurants. So if you have any connections, please pass purpletables.com on to them. And then last, I just have to give a shout out to Tammy and Kathy from the Silver Dawn Training Institute that equips professionals and loved ones with a new way to communicate with individuals, and they call it introspective improv. They go by the name of Dementia Raw. That's how a lot of people know them. I just took their 2-day certified dementia communication specialist training course here in the beginning of August, and it was absolutely fabulous. I would highly recommend it. You can check them out at dementiaraw.com, or if you want to see specific information on that training course, go to cdcsdementiaraw.com. That's cdcsdementiaraw.com. And again, know that Alzheimer Speaks has all kinds of platforms for you, so you can just check us out at alzheimerspeaks.com. And don't forget to go to our initiatives and projects page, where you'll find out information about screening movies, about memory cafes, about the Purple Angel Project, and so many others. Have a blessed week. Bye now.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sebesta here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.